Okay, let's try that again. Can you guys
There
see my
we
screen
go.
now?
There we go. We're back in.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. Thanks.
So as we said, take a look at your GoToWebinar if you need to look at that panel. What is mobile policy enforcement? As I was saying, we don't need to explain to you some of the challenges and freedoms brought by mobile devices to the workplace or to both K-12 and college campuses. Whether you're issuing those mobile devices through provisioning in your organization, either through your company or a one-to-one program in an education setting, or you're allowing devices to come on campus, there are all kinds of issues that surround mobile devices. What we're talking about today is more of the mobile device management side as opposed to the bring your own device side. Some of the pros and cons here of mobile are, on the plus side, obviously your employees and students can work anywhere, but that private data from your network isn't available anywhere, and that presents a lot of risk. Additionally, your mobile devices can connect to any network, whether that's going out over your mobile carrier or whether it's connecting to a Wi-Fi network. Those networks you don't have control over, so the network security may be lacking. Again, if you're dealing with a one-to-one program or a company device, even if you issue that device, you have to really think about what kind of content can be accessed when the device is out in the wild. That may violate your acceptable use policies and may therefore bring risk onto your organization when that device is outside of your network. So what are the differences between what, you hear a lot about mobile device management and what we're calling mobile policy enforcement? Let me kind of walk through our thinking on this, and we can take your questions. If you're looking for a mobile device management solution, usually this is something that's rolled out at a large corporation, an enterprise level. You're trying to control all the devices centrally. That may include things like app install, system updates, data recovery in the event the device is lost. If you need that kind of control, you really need to think about the control versus the cost. For Untangle's target market, which is below the enterprise, a lot of times the cost doesn't really square up with that need for control. A lot of times that's more of something that's really needed by an enterprise organization issuing the devices. The other challenge there is it creates a lot of complexity. That being able to manage devices to that level is non-trivial for an IT organization. So what we're talking about today is not true mobile device management, but what we call mobile policy enforcement, which is slightly different. The idea here is to enforce your network policy anywhere your devices go, whether they're your device or a student's device. The idea is that any device on any remote network has the same sort of policies that you enforce via your Untangle appliance on your own network. We have two different solutions depending on whether you choose NG Firewall or Internet Content Control. You can either go with a VPN solution or a non-VPN solution. We think this is a great idea for one-to-one programs, especially where the primary concern there is really about making sure that students are not accessing inappropriate content via a device issued by the school. And it's also useful for provision devices, especially in environments where those policies need to be enforced remotely for some reason determined by the organization. So now I'm going to walk through what the differences are between NG Firewall and Internet Content Control in regards to mobile policy enforcement. So for NG Firewall, as I mentioned in the previous slide, we have two different solutions depending on whether or not you want to use VPN. NG Firewall requires VPN. You can either do full or split tunnel VPN via our Ipsec Vpn application. On the IC control side, it's a non-VPN solution. It does client-side policy enforcement and does not require VPN. For NG Firewall, we use L2TP for simple authentication without additional software that works over Ipsec Vpn. It works with Windows, Mac, iOS, and Android. And all of your NG Firewall policies that you set up via our integrated rules engine, you can have those available to you, to your remote users via mobile policy enforcement for NG Firewall. On the IC control side, it's integrated at the OS level for Windows and Mac devices and via a browser app for iOS. and it offers centralized management and reporting, as well as all of the policies that you set up via IC control, as well as the reporting capabilities that are inherent in that product. So these are kind of two different ways to approach it depending on your needs. Some organizations use VPN for all of their remote workers, whereas for organizations that don't require VPN, IC control might be a better fit. Are there any questions that came up on mobile policy enforcement?
I think we're pretty well covered, Amy.
Okay, great. I'll kick it then over to Dirk for a demonstration of NG Firewall 10.2. Let's see if we can make him the presenter.
Thanks, Amy. Perfect. Can you see my screen?
I can.
Great. Thanks, everybody. I'm really excited, as always, to be showing off the new 10.2 features. So what I'll be doing, as usual, is that you go to wiki.untangle.com, which is where all the documentation is. Scroll down to change logs. Click on 10.2.0 change log. You can see all the major changes that we put into 10.2. I'll be walking through those and showing you some of the new functionality and new features. 10.2 is available to somewhere near 10% of currently 10.0 boxes, and we continue to roll those upgrades out and make them available to all boxes over time. So if you're currently running 10.0 or 10.1 and don't see the 10.2 upgrade, don't panic. You will see it soon. If you really want it now, send us an email, support@untangle.com, and we can get the 10.2 version to you immediately. Otherwise, we just continue to roll them out. Because the population's a little bit big, we don't want to swamp everyone and kill our servers. So you should have that available to your server regardless pretty soon. So 10.2 has some pretty cool new stuff. Obviously, as Amy was saying, a lot of it's about dealing with mobile devices. We already have a couple existing VPN solutions in the next generation firewall. OpenVPN, some of you are probably familiar with, and Ipsec. The problem with both those is that the mobile devices don't natively support those protocols. They do natively support L2TP, which actually runs on top of Ipsec. So if you buy an iPad off the shelf, it already comes with an L2TP client. And actually, Apple has a lot of tools to help you configure L2TP. So if you're a school and you have 1,000 iPads to manage, you can actually use the Apple administrator tools to help you configure the L2TP on all those devices. So L2TP was a big step forward in terms of really supporting native devices. Also Windows and all the regular OSs support L2TP as well. So it's yet another VPN option, but it has some really nice advantages over traditional ones. So let me go over the UI for that real quick. Scroll down to Ipsec. Again, this is in the Ipsec app. That's because it's built on top of Ipsec. It's actually its own protocol on top of Ipsec. You have your typical Ipsec options, and then you have a couple new tabs to deal with L2TP. So you'll go in here, you'll enable your L2TP server, tell it where to listen, all this, set up your secret, and then you'll go over to your iPad or Android or your Windows or Apple device or whatever, and basically configure it. There's only a few options. That's what's nice about L2TP. You'll put in the address of the device you want to connect to, the next generation firewall. You'll put in the Ipsec secret, and then you'll need a username password. And you can go in the local directory and create users, logins, and passwords for remote users to use. It's all password driven, in addition to the Ipsec secret. So hopefully this will really provide a nice, easy way to deal with those devices, especially Apple's, which installing OpenVPN on iPads is really tough. It's easier on Android, but it's still not straightforward, but L2TP is really, really straightforward. So we hope that will help you guys out. If you have any feedback after giving it a try, let us know. We are looking into all sorts of new things, like integrating it with Radius or Active Directory, dealing with a couple new options that people would like to see. So we'll be continuing to enhance L2TP support over time. Are there any questions on that? I'm going to keep going. Just shout out Amy if there's any questions I should cover. Again, if you have questions or I missed something or anything, just type it in the question box and we'll try to get to it. The web filter UI has just been redone, essentially. It's all the same functionality. We just reorganized it a bit, so don't be totally shocked when you go in there and it all looks different. It's pretty much the same. We just organize it as tabs instead of pop-ups. So now you have your categories and your block sites, and it's all as tabs instead of pop-ups. This makes it a little simpler, a little easier to deal with. So again, the functionality is the same, but this is a little bit easier. We did add a really nice new feature called Pass If Refers Match Pass Sites. Let me explain this for a second. Basically what that means is if you're a site that tends to block everything except certain sites, or a lot of stuff except certain sites, it's really a pain. Because let's say, for example, you only want to allow CNN.com. So you block literally everything, and then you put CNN.com on the pass list. And then if you go to CNN.com, half the page doesn't load. Well, that's because a lot of the content from CNN is actually loaded directly from other sites, and those sites aren't allowed. So what you end up with is an experience that doesn't really look right. You have access to CNN technically. You can download content from CNN, but you can't download content from all over the web. That's also required to properly render CNN.com. And that's just the way the web works. If you enable this option now, basically what it means is you'll be allowed to reach other sites as long as that content was referred from CNN.com. So if you block everything and now you enable this option and you allow CNN.com, CNN.com will likely correctly load because it will be able to actually download those content pieces from other sites that are usually blocked because they're referred from CNN.com. So hopefully this will help smooth things out for those people that are blocking a lot of stuff and want to allow certain sites. It's a nice new feature. Directory Connector also received kind of a facelift. Go take a look at it real quick. We've broken this out into 3 tabs now. So Directory Connector is actually 3 separate pieces of functionality. There's the user notification API, which is basically an API to allow remote devices or remote servers to notify Untangle Next Generation Firewall that, hey, this user is living at this IP. The reason that's important is if you go up here and you click on View Host, you want to know the usernames associated with the different hosts in your network so that if you have username rules like, you know, the CEO gets the special executive rack, or this teacher goes to this rack, or you want groups to, you know, this students go to student rack and teachers go, it's all based on username. So you need to know the username of the different IPs so that Untangle knows how to treat that traffic. The way that's typically done is the user notification API, which is essentially you run a script on your machine, it hits the user notification API and says, D. Morris is on this machine. And then it edits the host map and says, okay, I know this user lives here. So that's what this UI covers. This is not new functionality. It's just a new tab to see the settings along with this API. You can now disable it, which is new. You just couldn't do that previously. And there's also a new secret key field. The secret key basically is meaning if you set the secret key, it'll only accept an update if the secret key matches. That allows you to basically say not anybody can edit their username. So if you, for example, want to use the brand new Active Directory agent that runs on your Active Directory server and notifies the Next Generation Firewall when people log in, you can set the secret key. The benefit of the agent is instead of pushing out the script with the group policy object to all the machines, you just now install this agent on the one Active Directory server and it hits the user notification API. So it's more secure in the sense that people can't change the mapping or change their username associated with their IP. And it's also a little simpler. You don't have to deal with the group policy object. But you can download the user notification login script as well. It's the old way to do it, or you can run both. It's totally up to you. And the other 2 tabs are the same old Active Directory and Radius connectors, which are there previously. So again, not really any major changes here, just kind of a new UI and improved documentation to make it a little clearer. The big new feature in Directory Connector is the Active Directory agent, which if you go to the wiki and you click on Directory Connector, and you read this section, you can actually download the agent, which allows you to, and you run this on your Active Directory server, and it will update Untangle about the different IPs. So if you're dealing with a lot of users, this is really a nice, give it a try, play with it a little bit, and see how it works. You can basically just view the host in the View Host tab that I showed you earlier at the top of the rack and see if it's working. Were there any questions I should cover at this point?
I think we're okay.
Okay. I'll just keep trucking along. VRRP, based on feedback we got in 10.1, VRRP seems to be working pretty well for people, but there were some features that we needed. And probably the biggest one was the ability to have multiple addresses, because people who run VRRP full redundancy tend to have more complicated networks, and they tend to need to support multiple IPs. So we added a grid down here that if you enable it, now you can add multiple VRRP aliases. This is important for balancing, say, inbound traffic where your next generation firewall has 5 or 10 IPs that you need to forward to different servers. So now you can do that by setting them all up as VRRP aliases, have full redundancy in and out. It should work great for you. A couple minor changes. We renamed system info to about. IPsec now supports hostname configurations. People had asked for that for a while. Basically what that means is you don't have to type in an IP anymore. You can type in a hostname for the remote server you want to connect to. If the DNS for that host changes, IPsec will reconnect with the different DNS lookup. We added a virus blocker and virus blocker light, pass list. Yes, don't want to save that. That's convenient if you look in your web event log and you say, man, I'm scanning the same update file 100,000 times a day for viruses. I don't want to do that. You can basically now go into the pass list and say, you know what, I don't want to scan anything from Microsoft.com. Or these are the built-ins, but you can add all sorts of stuff if you want. It's pretty simple. So if you're having, just wasting a ton of CPU scanning stuff for viruses that you don't want to be, you can just go in your web event log and check that out and add it to the pass list, and it will basically not be scanned at all. It'll just pass right through. So be careful what you add there. We did reorganize the networking tab a little bit. Go back into networking. Basically, we felt some things were in advanced that weren't advanced, and we didn't want people going to advanced unless it was really necessary to change some advanced settings. So we moved DNS server and DHCP server outside of advanced up here to the top. And then the couple of advanced settings that were under those tabs previously, we put into DHCP and DNS server here. So keep in mind, it's a little reorganized. It's also nice because it gives you more real estate to edit some of these larger tables with the DHCP reservations and so on. Oh, I should talk about this one. Remove pagination from the quarantine servlet. People have been asking for this for about 5 years now, so we're finally excited to have this. So if you go look at your quarantine now, there's no show me 10 messages or 100 messages or 1,000 messages. It's just all of them in one huge tab. The reason this is possible is because the way we do grids now is slightly different. It doesn't actually load them in the memory of the browser until you actually scroll down. So it's possible to show these huge grids and have it still perform. It's actually loading it, unloading it from the browser's memory as I scroll. So the effect is it's just one big grid and it just works exactly the way you think. And the nice thing is now we can add a nice filter. So if I search for big, it'll show me all the emails in my quarantine with the word big in them. Big smile, big discounts. So that should make searching your quarantine a lot easier and dealing with your quarantine a lot easier, as well as sorting. You can do all the stuff you'd expect to do. You can even, say, I only want to see stuff with 10, greater than 10 score. Whatever you want to do, you can search with the drop downs, you can search down here, all sorts of stuff. So hopefully people will enjoy that, making dealing with the quarantine a lot easier. I fixed a couple issues with time zone issues, viewing reports, fixed a lot of translation issues. Another one people have been asking for forever is we now have the ability to sort correctly by IP. It's not going to change your life, but it really is a nice feature. Go down and see if I can show you what I'm talking about. So here, for example, is an event log of Firewall. Previously, these would sort alphabetically. Now, if you sort them, all IPs sort correctly, which is by the first number, then by the second number, and then by the third number, not alphabetically. So a nice feature. And a couple other minor changes I won't go into, but actually there's a lot more in Bugzilla. As always, you can follow along with development in Bugzilla. We are open source. You can actually see our change logs and bugs databases and all that stuff. So that about sums it up for 10.2. Hopefully you guys are excited about that. Again, it's not available to everybody yet. You can download it, a new install on the website. So if you want to go to untangle.com/download right now, you can get it. If you've already had a 10.0 box out there in the field, you can just email us and say, I'd like to get access to 10.2 now, or just wait a couple days and you'll probably have access to it soon anyway. We do continue to roll updates and make them available to more boxes over time. Upgrades from 9.x are not available for 10.0. So for those of you on 9.x, you will need to do a new install to get 10.0 or 10.2 or 10.1 or whatever. So keep that in mind if you're running the old 9.x. Are there any questions we should cover? Let's see. Let me look through the questions real quick. There are a lot of other areas. Go ahead.
Are there areas that have changed to lose the pagination or just the quarantine?
Yeah, we've continued to remove a lot of pagination. Pagination sucks. Pagination is when you have pages. It's really a pain. The reason you have to do it is because you can't kill your browser. Browsers are not meant to hold large data sets. So if you give it literally 10,000, 50,000 events, it's going to crash. The nice thing is that this new EXEGS library that we use has the ability to kind of dynamically load and unload stuff from the browser DOM as you're scrolling. So it's not going to kill your browser due to these huge data sets. So we've continually worked over time to get rid of all the pagination, because pagination really is a pain to deal with. So you can go and view 50,000 events, which will take a while, obviously, to query the database there. And then once it's done querying the database, it actually has to load all that, download it, a huge data set from the server, and then display it in your browser. But the nice thing is now you can see it's actually just downloading the event. So it'll take a while to download the events. Once it gets to 50,000, you'll view the whole thing without any pages. Without pagination allows you to search much more easily and filter. So at the top of all these, you can go. And so the event logs used to have pagination, and now the event logs don't have any pagination. I think that was a 10.1 change. So over time, we're trying to get rid of pagination. It really just makes things easier not having to deal with scrolling and pages. So hopefully we're making some progress on that. I'm sure there's still some places with pagination on them. The web filtering, if you're referring and you, there's a question about how does the pass referrer thing interact with ad blocker. Any changes to web filter are completely independent of ad blocker. So if you pass CNN, you can do anything you want in CNN or in web filter, and it's really not going to affect ad blocker. They're completely separate applications. You can basically think of them as separate appliances on your network. So it doesn't matter what you add to the pass list and web filter, ad blocker is still going to block the ads on CNN. Now, if you add CNN.com to the ad pass list in ad blocker, then yes, it will pass. But the ad blocker doesn't have the referrer functionality, so it's not going to say pass anything that's referred by CNN. Reading through a lot of the questions here. there's a question about managing mobile devices. What's the difference between Capture Portal and L2TP? Well, Capture Portal is basically just presents a, if you're, quote, captured, it presents a block page that says, hey, I don't know about you. You need to log in, or you need to accept this message, or I just want to display you this nice hello. It basically shows the user a web page before they can get to the, quote, internet to accept this or log in or whatever. So it's independent of the VPN. Now, if you want to run Capture Portal on remote VPN users, you can. The nice thing about L2TP is if you run it full tunnel, everything's going to be going through your Untangle server. So they're basically treated like they're local. You can think of it as an extension of your network. They get the full filtering policy that you have in your next generation firewall. So if you're running a Capture Portal that requires a login, they will have to log in. If you're running bandwidth control will shake them. If you're running web cache, it will cache them. If you're running web filter, it will filter them, and so on and so on. Even your firewall rules, if you go in now, you'll notice there's a new, if I click source interface, there's a new L2TP interface. So you can treat these clients somewhat differently. You can set up new policies for them in Policy Manager, and you can have a specific rack dedicated to L2TP people. So the VPN is just really a way for these people to get on your network. The Captive Portal is a way to show them a block page / login page before they can get the internet if you choose to do so.
There were a couple questions here about upgrading from 9.x to 10. I know we've covered this before, but can you just briefly summarize? In short, you cannot export your settings and re-import them to 10. But
Sure. Yeah, that's correct. You cannot upgrade from 9.x to 10.0. It is a new install. There are some cases where people have had some success exporting rules up here and then importing them. I would not suggest doing so. The formats have changed. I would just do a new install and set it up. It doesn't take as long as you'd think. I know the Web Filter Lite, if you go into our Web Filter Pass List, Web Filter Lite or Web Filter Lite Pass List or Block List, if you have a big list here, those will work, this grid. So generally speaking, no, it's a new install only. There's a whole bunch of reasons for that. There's a new underlying OS. There's a completely new networking implementation. The settings from 9.x do not map. We've changed the way certain things work, like NAT, such that there is no one-to-one mapping. You cannot configure them identically because they work different.
There are some questions here. A couple of people are asking, what is mobile device policy management? What is Untangle's MDM solution? I'm not sure if you're joining late. We covered the mobile policy enforcement at the beginning of this presentation. If you have joined mid-webinar, we will be sending recordings to everyone who registered. So please just stay tuned and we'll get those recordings out to you briefly.
Yeah, and I will say it's not a specific app. At least let me talk about it on the next generation firewall. Let's say you set up L2TP. So you go in your IPsec and you set up all your L2TP settings, and then you go through your 100 iPad users and you configure them to connect full tunnel, forced all the time. Basically, when they go home, they're still going to go into your network and then out through Untangle, next generation firewall, so they get full filtering. If you then wanted to, you can go into the Policy Manager and say, okay, let me create a new rack called L2TP. I'll create it, based on the default rack, and then maybe I'll modify it a little bit. L2TP users. Okay, so now I got a new rack, and then I'm going to go in here and create a new rule saying, well, I want all L2TP users to get that rack. No, I haven't actually saved it yet, so the rack's not there, but that's how I would do it. Hit save, and then I would go and configure that rack. Maybe I want to install web filter and change the web filtering policy or do ad blocking or whatever. It works just like clients are on your network, so it's no different. You can set up whatever policy you like. You can do times a day. On top of that, you can pretty much do anything. You have the full access to the Policy Manager just like they're local. So this really gives you a way to crack down, and especially a lot of the Apple tools, you can do forced full tunnel. So let's say you have a school and you own the iPads and you want to filter them all the time, even when they're home, even when they're on 4G or some external network. You have the ability now to do that with the Apple administration tools that they provided. we found we could receive a frequent DNS VL categorization failed. If you're getting any kind of thing up at the top of the rack, you have a DNS problem, you need to work on your DNS configuration. You should not be, basically when you log in, it runs a whole bunch of tests. So if I hit refresh, I'm logging in. When you do that, it runs a whole bunch of tests in the background to determine the health of your next generation firewall. If anything fails, or anything suspect, it will pop up an alert up here that says, you know, hey, there's something noteworthy that you should know. If you're getting a DNS error up there, that's bad. You've got a DNS problem. It may be intermittent, but that's still something you should really look at because a lot of Untangle next generation firewall stuff relies on being connected to the internet. And if DNS is not working, things are not going to work. Using L2TP on mobile devices can control app downloads or application purchases. I'm not sure. I mean, as much as you could if they're on the local network. L2TP just means they're remote, but it's basically just, you could probably go into application control and block all sorts of stuff. I don't know about purchases specifically.
Block iTunes, I guess.
Yeah, I think you can block iTunes, but that's going to block all of iTunes.
I mean, just to be clear, it's not going to control what is installed on the mobile device, like a true MDM solution, correct? I mean, I don't know if they're asking about, like, ability to control what apps are installed on that mobile device.
Yeah, it basically, L2TP just basically virtually puts them on your network so you can filter them. You can still use application control. It's not on the device. You're not going to change anything about on the device. But you can use HTTPS Inspector and block all sorts of things. So, you know, if you determine that purchases are done over HTTPS and you block certain IP, yeah, you can probably figure it out and block a certain task. L2TP just means you're doing it remotely, but that doesn't really change the nature of the tools you have available to do these things. Untangle does scale really well. There's a question about multi-core, multi-processor. Generally, when you're speccing out a box, I would encourage you to go with more cores instead of more powerful cores because Untangle's really highly threaded. So it benefits a great deal from more cores, especially when it comes to latency. Do the 10.2 versions offer an option using static IP addresses for OpenVPN users as it was? Actually, all 10.x has static IPs for OpenVPN users. That hasn't changed. I don't know why that got started. I think it was on the forums or something. But you can basically just go in here to OpenVPN, and you can see their addresses. These never change. They're statically assigned when the client connects the first time, and they never change. So I guess, yes?
Sure.
Yep.
Just so that we're clear, the product does not prevent the user from downloading particular software to their machine, correct?
I'm not an expert on how the Apple App Store works. There's no software running on the iPad, but you may, given the tools of application control, HTTPS Inspector, and Web Filter, be able to block purchases. I don't know.
Okay.
I'm not an expert. My guess would be you could probably figure out a way to run HTTPS Inspector, block certain URLs, and you might be able to prevent downloading of apps, but it would require a little bit of research and reading the event logs and seeing what you need to block.
So an NG firewall can definitely block BitTorrent activity, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
That works pretty well.
So we'll do that. Got it. Hopefully that answers your question, Samuel.
Yes, we have application control, which works the same whether they're coming in over LTTP or whether they're on the local network. So you could just go down here and say Skype is blocked or BitTorrent is blocked. And it does a pretty good job of both those. So BitTorrent, you can say here, or Skype. Skype works pretty well now, by the way. Or if you're having a really, really tricky protocol that basically is detecting as being blocked and figuring out a way to sneak out, instead you can create up a bandwidth control rule, add them to the penalty box, and then once they're in the penalty box saying, hey, I detected you're using BitTorrent, and then you can show them a Captive Portal page, you can make them offline for an hour as punishment, you can do all sorts of crazy things if you're having a really tough time blocking things.
So there's this question around whether or not this is completely user-proof. And there were a couple questions from this same person. One of the ways you should think about this is sort of a best practice. If somebody wants to root their phone, I don't know how much you're going to be able to do to prevent them from doing things like trying to disable this. Do you want to make a comment on this, and more,
we didn't. I can't say with 100% certainty that there's no way. Usually, if you have physical access to a device, you can figure out a way to do anything you want.
He's specifically asking about Android, but I think it's
Android, I don't know. Apple, I think you basically can force it, and they're not allowed to have administrator changes, so they can't change it. So in theory, yes, you can force it. I don't know about Android, though. Android's a little bit different. I know Apple provides tools that say, this is an administrator change. You don't have administrator access, so you can't change the L2TP settings.
The question on whether or not we can block UltraSurf is similar to BitTorrent. That's another thing that application control can handle. We're pretty good with both of those.
Yeah, UltraSurf works pretty well as far as I know. I don't know about Hotspot. They did add a whole bunch of new signatures in 10.2, so there's new applications in here.
A couple people have enjoyed that Dirk's using a Windows XP laptop.
I know, I was chuckling at that.
Which I commented on earlier. This is our conference room laptop. It's pretty old.
Yes.
He doesn't develop on
I am
XP.
thrilled to, this is my only Windows machine, and I'm thrilled that they are no longer releasing updates so that it doesn't bug me about updates anymore. And it will be closed after this webinar, and then it will be reopened for the next webinar. And this machine's a little old. It's not even worth installing something new.
Somebody's asking about a roadmap to a full MDM solution. We covered that off a little bit at the beginning of the webinar. I don't think, and Dirk, feel free to comment, but I'm just going to cover for both product lines. I don't think our focus is so much on providing an enterprise-grade MDM solution as it is to provide more mobile policy enforcement, which is already available in both product lines. Do you see anything else coming down the pike for?
Like I said, we're continuing to take feedback. We've already had a lot of feedback on L2TP that we'd like to see that would make mobile device management easier, and we'll continue to go from there. I'm not saying we have everything written in stone that we'll be doing. We're continuing to look at options. For example, integrating L2TP with Active Directory would be really nice. Turns out it's hard. Doing it with Radius is not so hard. And you can obviously enable Radius on your directory server. So we're looking into that. That'll be a step forward. I'm not sure if that really answers your question about a full MDM roadmap. No, I don't think we have that. I think we're going to continue to take user feedback and see what issues they deal with and try to offer them tools to deal with those.
Somebody's asking for a how-to on setting up L2TP on mobile devices. We were working on a video for that.
Yeah, video will help for sure. That'd be nice. I think there's also some good docs on Ipsec Vpn that we've been. Where do we put those? We're going to be working on those because it's really quite simple in most OSs. The only OS that's not simple is Linux. You can set up for the other two VPNs easy, IPsec traditional and OpenVPN very easily in Linux, but you can't do L2TP. It's such a pain. The other OSs are really brain dead simple, but we'll hopefully get some screenshots up soon. Oh, that's another one I didn't cover. Thank you, who was that? Frank, for mentioning that. The input filter rules are now, quote, read-only. Let me bring those up real quick. It's only read-only if you do a new install. So some of you won't see this on upgrade. But now these can't be edited. They can only be enabled or disabled. That's really just to prevent people from making a mess of their settings. This one actually can't be disabled anymore. If you disable it and hit save, it will complain. Because that's a huge security risk. That's not meant to be disabled, but people kept doing it. So we hopefully fix that. And these other ones are read-only, so you can't edit them. You can only enable or disable them. Hopefully that will prevent people from going in here saying, oh, I'm going to change this one, which is really a bad idea. You can obviously add rules, so you can still add whatever you want. And when you add a rule, it's not read-only. So you can basically still do whatever you want. But if you go in there and see these are read-only, they're read-only because they're not supposed to be edited. They're just there to turn certain things on. So if you want to allow SSH, click on that, and that'll allow SSH. By the way, don't do that unless you set a good password. As always, we don't recommend doing that ever. I'm allowing HTTPS on LAN, which is a personal preference. Any changes in how the Active Directory login script works? Yeah, there were a couple of minor changes. If you go in here, I think we changed the default back to loop. This is one of those things where there's no right answer. So if you go in the directory connection and you download the login script, no, I don't want to run it. Whatever. I would edit that in Notepad or something. There's a couple minor changes. I think we changed it to default loop on, but as always, you want to look at the script over and change the variables at the top to tune it for your setup. And a lot of people are now probably going to stop using this because we have the agent out, and the agent's much easier to install, and it's a little more secure because if smart users figure out how to hit the API to change their username, they can do that. With the new agent and the secret key, they can't do that anymore. Can you create policies that require versions, say Firefox? And yeah, you could probably do that. Here's what I would do. Let's say you wanted to treat Firefox users differently. Now, again, when a new TCP session comes in, we can't really tell if it's coming from Firefox or Chrome or IE. All we know is there's a connection request at the TCP level. But we do store information about different hosts on the network. What browser they were using last? Mozilla 5, that's Firefox. This is like different HTTP libraries. Dropbox, Mozilla 5. So it looks like most everybody here is using Firefox. You can go in here, Firefox 24 iSqueezle. So this is a Linux box using Firefox 24. You can use this string to create rules. So let's say I wanted to, I don't know, treat Firefox 24 users differently. I can go in here and I can say, okay, Firefox users to Firefox rack. And I go in the user agent star Firefox /24, something like that, and then you'd say Firefox rack that you'd have to set up and figure it out. And obviously, when a new session comes in, if the client's user agent, as stored in the host table, matches this string, it will say it matches this rule, and it'll send it to that rack. So you can set up rules to kind of deal with different browsers. And the user agent string is updated every few minutes with the most recent HTTP traffic that we've seen from that host. So it's not perfect in the sense that, you know, if you have multiple browsers open, well, it's going to get confusing because 1 second the user agent string is going to be this, and the next second it's going to be that, depending on they're both creating traffic. But it is a tool that you can use to kind of deal with that. And if you combine that with Capture Portal, you can do fun things like bug people that are using IE and show them a warning that says, please don't use IE or things like that. But again, you know, you may get in trouble there. It's cute, it's funny, but a lot of libraries on the back end may use IE as a tool to reach the internet. And that's not necessarily the same as the user using IE. That just means that, you know, some application running on Windows down here in the tab is using, quote, IE to reach the internet. With the rule being read-only, how do I disable SSH access but only allow it to one site? That's, you just go in here and you don't enable this rule, and then you create a new rule that says allow SSH destination port 22 source address 1.2.3.4 allow. You know, they're just rules like anything else. They're just the ones that exist. They're not meant to be modified. You don't have to use those. That being said, I would not enable SSH. Is there no login script for Mac? I'm not really familiar. We don't have one for Mac, but basically the API is public. You can write whatever scripts you want. Like a Linux script would take you 2 seconds to write using wget. The API is documented on the wiki, so I'm not super familiar with scripting languages, but a Mac would seem to be pretty easy because it has all the Linuxy tools like wget right there available. But I'm not sure how the login process works on Macs and how they integrate with your domain and all that and where you would launch the script. But the API is documented, so it's fairly simple. You just hit this URL.
Somebody had a question about HIPAA requirements, and if you want to email us at sales@untangle.com, we have a white paper that can tell you how Untangle can help contribute to you being HIPAA compliant. Did we have any other questions at this time? Now's the time to ask them on the question panel.
Yeah, we had a lot of questions. I think we covered most of them, or at least most of the ones that are relevant. As always, if we didn't get to your question, you can email sales, you can email support, you can jump on the forums at forums.untangle.com. There's a lot of ways to reach us.
It's on the last slide if you have the slide deck available. Otherwise, yeah, you can always get us at either sales@untangle.com for any kind of pre-sales questions or support@untangle.com, or go to the support.untangle.com website, which has a wealth of information.
Did my screen freeze, or is it showing the slide?
No, it's just frozen.
Oh, unfortunately, my screen's not showing up correctly.
I can see the slide.
Oh, you can?
Okay.
Okay.
Yep, we got it.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, great. If there are no other questions, then I want to thank everybody for coming out to the webinar today. As I mentioned at the top of the webinar, we will be sending out a recording to everybody who registered. So thanks again for your time, and feel free to contact us in any of the ways listed below. Thank you.